Liam stepped off the transport pod, his boots landing softly on the smooth metallic surface of Virelia's royal landing platform. The air shimmered faintly with an iridescent hue, and the sky above was painted with colors he had never seen before, streaks of gold and violet blending into a soft cerulean. The city around him floated in the air, massive towers suspended by unknown energy, connected with bridges that pulsed gently under the alien sun. Liam had walked on many worlds before, but none felt as alive, as strange, and as alien as this one. He adjusted the strap of his equipment bag over his shoulder and took a deep breath. His mission was simple on paper: attend a diplomatic reception hosted by the royal family and assess their technological and political systems. On the ground, it was anything but simple. He had trained for years, prepared for hostile encounters, and mastered cultural diplomacy in dozens of alien societies. Yet there was something about Virelia that set his nerves on edge. It wasn't the danger. It was the presence of someone who held authority over this entire planet. Someone young yet commanding, who could make or break his mission with a single word. Two tall, slender alien attendants approached him, their limbs gracefully bending at angles that humans could barely mimic. They spoke in the melodic, fluid language of the Virelians, but Liam understood them through a translation device implanted in his earpiece. "The princess awaits, human," one said, its voice almost musical, tinged with something that sounded like amusement. Liam nodded and followed. The attendants led him through a series of corridors that shimmered as if the walls themselves were alive. Light rippled across surfaces, adjusting to his movement, and strange symbols floated mid-air, shifting with no visible support. The humans he had met on other worlds had complex cities, sure, but none had architecture that seemed to breathe like this. He tried to keep his focus on the task, to keep himself composed, but he couldn't help noticing how utterly alien everything around him was. At last, they reached a grand hall. It was massive, the ceiling disappearing into a haze of soft golden light. A crowd of Virelians stood in formation, their faces a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Liam could feel their eyes on him, scanning, analyzing, wondering if this human was worth the effort of their attention, and then he saw her. Princess Kalira stepped forward from a raised dais at the far end of the hall. She was young, only 19, but she carried herself with the poise and authority of someone far older. Her eyes were large, luminous, and colored in a way humans did not naturally have. Her features were sharp yet elegant, her expression confident, almost daring. Liam could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were already measuring him, already passing judgment. Kalira's voice cut through the hall with clear authority. "So this is the human they sent to us?" There was a trace of disdain, almost a sneer. "I must say I expected something stronger, more impressive." She stepped closer, her movements light and deliberate. "Do you even belong in a place like this? Or are you simply lost, hoping no one notices your weaknesses?" The hall seemed to fall silent at her words, the crowd shifting as though anticipating Liam's response. He could have argued, could have countered her insult with sarcasm, with sharp words, but he did not. He simply stood tall, keeping his posture straight and calm, letting her words pass over him without reaction. There was a stillness about him that no one expected, and Kalira's eyes flickered with something unreadable: confusion, frustration, perhaps even a touch of intrigue. After a long moment, Liam turned and walked toward the exit, not aggressively, not angrily, but with a steady, quiet purpose. He did not shout, he did not demand respect, and he did not beg for it. He simply moved, leaving the room on his own terms. The sound of his boots echoed against the walls, the rhythm deliberate, measured, leaving Kalira and her court stunned. "Wait," one of the attendants whispered, but Liam did not stop. The princess herself remained on the dais, frozen, her eyes following him as if she were trying to comprehend what had just happened. No one had ignored her before. No one had walked away without a word, without a reaction. She had expected anger, insult, humiliation, but not this quiet defiance. Outside the hall, Liam paused and looked back once. He did not smile. He did not glare. He simply observed, taking in the sight of Kalira standing there, momentarily off balance. Then he turned fully and continued down the corridor, letting the echoes of his boots fade into silence. The attendants who followed kept their distance, cautious now, their earlier amusement replaced by curiosity. One of them finally spoke in a hushed tone. "He is unlike any human we have known. There is something in him, something they do not teach, Liam did not respond. He did not need to. He had already made his point. A human's strength was not always in words, in insults or victories shouted across a hall. Sometimes it was in calmness, in restraint, in the quiet decision to walk away when provoked. He arrived at his temporary quarters within the palace. The room was luxurious, yet the alien design left him slightly unsettled. The walls shimmered. Floating panels shifted slowly to display unfamiliar constellations, and the bed floated slightly above the floor. Liam set down his bag and took a seat, running a hand through his hair. He thought about the princess and her words. Her insult had been sharp, calculated, designed to provoke, yet he had not reacted. He realized that this was the first test he had faced on Virelia, and perhaps the most important one, to demonstrate that humans had a form of strength that was silent but undeniable. As night fell over the floating city, the alien sky darkened, revealing twin moons that glimmered with pale light. Liam looked out at them, thinking of the worlds he had visited, the creatures he had met, and the cultures he had navigated. None had challenged him quite like this. None had made him feel that so much could be conveyed through a single glance, a single word, or the refusal to speak at all. Meanwhile, far above in the royal chambers, Kalira paced. She had never faced anyone like Liam. Her first instinct had been to insult, to assert superiority, to test the limits of her authority. And yet he had done something unexpected. He had not argued. He had not retaliated. He had simply walked away. The audacity, the calmness, the control, it unsettled her more than any human she had known should have. Her advisors murmured among themselves, but Kalira barely heard them. She was thinking, analyzing, wondering what manner of human possessed such quiet strength. She had been trained to rule, trained to command respect through power, skill, and influence, and yet, here was a human who required none of those things to leave a mark. That night, Liam lay on the floating bed, eyes tracing the patterns of constellations on the ceiling. He thought about the mission ahead, the potential dangers and the expectations that the alien court would place upon him. He knew that the path forward would not be easy. Princess Kalira would not relent easily, and the challenges of Virelia would be unlike anything he had faced. Yet he also knew that one simple truth remained. His strength was not in matching their arrogance, but in being himself, calm, confident, and silent when necessary. He closed his eyes, letting the faint hum of the palace soothe him. Tomorrow would be another day, another test, and he would face it, just as he had faced this first one, not with words but with quiet strength, letting his actions speak for themselves. On Virelia, that might be the only way to truly show what humans were capable of. Outside, the twin moons glimmered over the floating city. Somewhere, high in her chambers, Kalira stared out at the same view, thinking about the human who had walked away without a word. She did not know it yet, but her life and the story of Virelia was about to change because of him. The next morning, the palace corridors hummed with quiet energy, as if the building itself anticipated the events about to unfold. Liam walked through the long passageways, his boots making soft echoes on the polished floor. He had already begun to feel the weight of alien eyes following him wherever he moved. Some watched with curiosity, some with suspicion, and some with a flicker of doubt. Among them all, none seemed more challenging than Princess Kalira, whose presence lingered in the air like a silent storm. Kalira watched from her chambers as he passed by, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. She had spent the night thinking about the human who had refused to reply, who had walked away without a word. There was something different about him, something that made her pulse quicken in ways she did not fully understand. He had dignity, patience, and a calmness that did not come from fear or submission. And for the first time she felt the stirrings of uncertainty. Had she underestimated humans? Her curiosity soon became a plan. She decided to design a series of trials, subtle yet public, meant to expose Liam's weaknesses, to remind him of the gap between human and Virelian. She summoned her advisors and instructed them to prepare challenges that tested intellect, agility, and social understanding. Each test would seem innocent to outsiders, yet each was carefully designed to embarrass a human who dared to enter their society without deference. When Liam was informed of the first trial, he did not show surprise. He had faced complex puzzles and alien technologies before. The Virelians expected him to falter. He expected to learn. The trial began in a hall that floated high above the city, its floor transparent, revealing the dizzying expanse below. A series of geometric shapes hovered in midair, forming a three-dimensional puzzle that required precise manipulation to solve. Kalira watched from the gallery above, her expression poised, confident that the human would struggle. She whispered to an advisor, "Notice how he hesitates. Surely this will reveal his limitations?" Liam, however, studied the shapes carefully. He noticed patterns the Virelians had overlooked, subtle alignments that made the solution almost intuitive. He moved slowly, deliberately, rotating and combining pieces with careful thought. The puzzle required patience, and patience was something humans excelled at in ways aliens often did not. Minutes passed, then 10, and a quiet sound of completion echoed through the hall. The puzzle settled into its proper formation, a smooth alignment of light and shape. The Virelians gasped softly. Even Kalira's confident smile wavered. Liam had solved the puzzle not through superior strength or alien intellect, but through observation, logical thinking, and composure under pressure. Kalira's eyes narrowed, a flicker of frustration mixed with curiosity. "Interesting," she murmured. "Perhaps he is not as simple as he appears." But she did not let anyone hear her hesitation. She quickly moved to the next trial, designed to test his physical agility. This trial was set in a floating garden, its platform suspended high in the air by invisible forces. The challenge required balancing on narrow paths, leaping across moving platforms, and avoiding gaps that would plunge one into the dizzying heights below. Many Virelians moved through it with ease, their bodies light, elongated, and perfectly adapted to such maneuvers. Liam, a human, had a different body, one that relied on endurance, calculated timing, and instinct. As he stepped onto the first platform, the wind of the high altitude brushed against his face and his muscles tensed. He focused entirely on the movement ahead, feeling the rhythm of the shifting platforms. His first jump was precise, his landing steady. The Virelians whispered among themselves, noting his balance, his patience, his refusal to panic. One platform moved faster than the rest, designed to test reflexes and timing. Liam studied its motion, waited for the exact moment, and leaped. The crowd held its breath as he landed safely, steady as if it were a simple walk. A few Virelians shook their heads in disbelief. Kalira, watching from above, clenched her fists. She had expected hesitation, failure, embarrassment. Instead, she saw skill, confidence, and calmness, the very qualities that defined human resilience. A small part of her felt unsettled. Here was a human who did not fight with claws, fangs, or alien strength. He fought with patience, wit, and composure, and somehow it was enough. The final test for the day was social, a simulation of a royal negotiation. Liam was placed in a chamber with holographic representations of several Virelian leaders, each with conflicting demands and hidden motives. The goal was to negotiate an agreement while maintaining fairness and demonstrating understanding of their culture. Most humans would have faltered, intimidated by the shifting rules and alien reasoning, but Liam observed quietly. He asked questions, listened attentively, and proposed solutions that balanced the interests of all parties. Slowly, the holographic leaders nodded in agreement. The challenge, designed to reveal human inferiority, instead showcased human adaptability, empathy, and strategic thinking. When the trials concluded, Kalira summoned him to her chambers. She expected him to apologize, to explain, perhaps even to justify his success. But Liam walked in quietly, his posture straight, his expression neutral. He did not boast. He did not demand praise, he simply acknowledged her presence. Kalira, frustrated but intrigued, spoke first. "You have done well today, human. Perhaps better than I expected, yet do not assume this changes anything. You are still my guest and you still have much to learn about my world." Liam nodded. "I am here to learn and to understand, but I will not compromise who I am to satisfy pride or expectation." His voice was calm, firm, but not confrontational. Kalira stared at him, her expression shifting subtly. She had been trained to command, to dominate, to test and dismiss those she deemed unworthy, and yet here was a human who refused to play by her rules, who refused to rise to her provocations. She had no choice but to acknowledge his strength even if it irritated her pride. "Interesting," she murmured, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You are stubborn, I will give you that." Liam inclined his head slightly. He did not need to argue. His calmness spoke louder than any words could. Over the following days, Kalira continued to devise subtle challenges. She hoped to provoke anger, to draw a reaction to remind him of his human limitations. But Liam met each trial with patience, intelligence, and quiet confidence. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he found clever ways around the obstacles, and sometimes he simply observed, letting the challenges reveal more about the Virelians than about himself. The court began to take notice. Whispers spread among the advisors and attendants. The human was unlike any they had known. His calm, his intelligence, and his ability to act without arrogance or anger made him remarkable. Even those who had doubted him at first found themselves impressed. Kalira, however, struggled. She had expected to dominate, to instruct, to expose weakness. Instead, she found herself questioning her own assumptions. How could a human, a species she had considered inferior, demonstrate such strength, patience, and quiet influence? Each time she tried to provoke him, he simply refused to respond, leaving her both frustrated and fascinated. One evening, she approached him privately. The palace gardens glowed with soft light from hovering lanterns, casting shimmering reflections on the floating platforms. She tested him again, speaking with sharpness in her voice, designed to wound, to provoke, to assert superiority. But Liam did not answer. He walked slowly, deliberately through the garden, his steps measured, his eyes calm. Kalira watched, her frustration giving way to something she could not quite name. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. His refusal to engage on her terms was not fear, it was dignity. For the first time, Kalira considered that humans were not simply lesser beings. They possessed a different kind of power, one she had underestimated, one that did not rely on superiority or pride but on patience, courage, and quiet confidence. As Liam walked away, leaving her standing among the glowing flowers and floating bridges, she realized something important. This human was not here to compete with her pride. He was here to show what humans could achieve when they acted with integrity and strength. And that realization unsettled her in ways she could not yet admit, even to herself. That night, Liam reflected on the past few days. He had faced tests, challenges, and insults, yet he remained calm, observant, and measured. He had not needed to argue, fight, or boast. Instead, he let his actions demonstrate human capability. On Virelia, where pride and power were often measured by dominance and aggression, his quiet approach was beginning to make an impact. And somewhere above him, Kalira stared at the same stars, thinking about the human who refused to respond, who refused to yield, who had quietly reshaped the way she viewed him and his kind. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The human's quiet strength, his patience, and his refusal to rise to insult had begun to leave an impression not just on her, but on the entire court of Virelia. And in the days to come, that impression would grow into something far greater than anyone expected. A week had passed since Liam first arrived on Virelia, and the city seemed to hum with a subtle tension that no one could ignore. Rumors of the human's quiet strength had spread through the palace, whispered in corridors and floating gardens alike. Some found it impressive, others unsettling, but everyone agreed on one thing: he was different. Liam moved through the city with careful observation, studying the alien architecture, the flowing light of the streets, and the energy of the floating platforms. He had grown more comfortable with the unfamiliar physics of the environment, but he remained alert. Every detail mattered. Every gesture, every glance, every pattern could reveal something about the world he was in. Princess Kalira watched him closely, still fascinated and irritated in equal measure. She had attempted more tests, subtle provocations disguised as polite challenges, and Liam had met them all with calm and intelligence. She could not deny that he was capable, but that acknowledgement stung her pride. She was the princess of Virelia, trained to command respect and inspire awe, yet this human seemed immune to her usual methods. On this day, a different challenge awaited. Intelligence reports had indicated that a group of rogue factions was plotting against the royal family. They sought to destabilize the government, exploit the people, and possibly even harm the princess herself. The palace council was debating how to respond, but Liam, with his sharp perception and human intuition, noticed subtle signs others missed: unusual traffic patterns, coded messages, and strange energy fluctuations near key locations. Kalira had dismissed his initial observations with a hint of skepticism, but the palace council, intrigued by his reputation, allowed him to investigate further. Liam's approach was methodical. He examined data, studied maps, and observed the city's activity. He did not rush, did not assume superiority, but quietly pieced together a picture that was both clear and alarming. As he moved through the city, Liam noticed small details others overlooked. A floating vendor selling exotic fruits had been approached by unknown figures who lingered too long near sensitive areas. A transport drone had been reprogrammed, its schedule subtly altered. He followed the trail patiently, noting each irregularity. This was not the first time humans had relied on observation and analysis to survive and thrive, and Liam drew on every skill he had honed over years of exploration and training. Kalira observed him from her chambers. She had been taught to act decisively, to assume power and dominance, but she found herself frustrated by Liam's approach. He did not command attention, did not issue orders, yet he moved with purpose, quietly influencing events through his actions. For the first time, she felt compelled to follow his lead rather than dictate it. When he returned to the palace with his findings, Kalira finally addressed him directly. "You are bold, human. You observe what others ignore, and you move without seeking praise. But this is dangerous. If your assumptions are wrong, it could endanger not just you, but everyone here." Liam met her gaze calmly. "I am aware of the risks, Princess, but ignoring what I have seen could be far more dangerous. I intend to prevent harm, and I will do so carefully." Together, they devised a plan to confront the rogue faction. Kalira's role was to provide access and authority. Liam's was to guide strategy and anticipate moves. As they moved through the city, Liam's human instincts allowed them to anticipate ambush points, identify weaknesses, and avoid unnecessary conflict. Each step forward showcased his ability to remain calm under pressure, to think strategically, and to act decisively without drawing attention to himself. The confrontation came sooner than expected. In the shadowed corridors beneath a floating platform, the rogue faction attempted to strike. Their movements were swift and precise, yet Liam remained composed. He did not charge blindly. He assessed, positioned, and directed Kalira and her guards with concise gestures and calm instructions. The rogue faction underestimated the humans' adaptability, expecting brute force to intimidate, yet Liam's strategic planning allowed them to neutralize threats without unnecessary violence. Kalira watched, astonished. Her training as a princess had prepared her for leadership and combat, yet she realized that human courage and intelligence could rival, and sometimes surpass, her own methods. She could not deny the effectiveness of Liam's approach. When the confrontation ended, the palace was secure once more. Liam had acted not for recognition, but for duty. He had not sought glory, and yet his influence was undeniable. The court began to see him not as an outsider, but as an ally whose calmness and insight were valuable assets. That evening, Kalira requested a private audience. The floating gardens glowed in soft light, casting reflections across the water-like surfaces. She approached Liam with measured steps, her expression guarded yet thoughtful. "You have proven your value, human. Your methods, your courage. I admit I underestimated you. Perhaps I still do." Liam nodded politely. "I am here to assist, Princess, not to compete. I follow reason, not pride." Kalira frowned slightly, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. She had been trained to command, to assert, to dominate. Yet Liam's calm resolve challenged her assumptions. She found herself questioning her approach, wondering whether her pride had blinded her to the strengths of others. Over the next days, Liam worked closely with Kalira and the Royal Council to strengthen the palace's defenses and improve the city's security. His human perspective introduced innovative solutions that the Virelians had not considered, blending logic, observation, and adaptability. Each success reinforced the growing respect the court had for him, while Kalira's fascination deepened. She could not help but notice how different he was from anyone she had met before, how his calmness and determination influenced those around him. One evening, during a quiet moment in the floating gardens, Kalira approached him again. "I must ask," she said, her voice soft but firm, "how do you remain so calm, so certain of yourself, even when everything around you is uncertain?" Liam looked out over the city, the twin moons reflecting on the floating structures. "Calmness comes from understanding, Princess. I do not ignore danger or challenges, but I do not let them control me. Observation, thought, and patience are often stronger than anger or pride. Kalira considered his words. She had lived her life in a world of influence, control, and authority, yet she had never encountered anyone who commanded attention without force. Liam did not demand respect. He earned it quietly, through action and presence. In the following days, the bond between them shifted subtly. Kalira's attempts to provoke him became less frequent, replaced by genuine curiosity and a desire to understand his approach. She watched how he interacted with others, how his calm and steady demeanor inspired trust, how his intelligence guided decisions without arrogance. Even the palace staff began to mirror his patience and thoughtfulness, showing that human influence extended beyond mere physical presence. Liam, for his part, remained focused on the mission. He had not come to Virelia to impress, to challenge, or to dominate. He had come to observe, understand, and protect. Yet he could not ignore the subtle change in Kalira's demeanor. She was still proud, still confident, still a princess of immense capability, but she was learning gradually that humans could possess strength that was quiet, resilient, and powerful in ways she had never anticipated. As another night fell over the floating city, Liam looked out across the platforms and towers, considering what lay ahead. The rogue faction had been weakened, but the challenges of Virelia were far from over. The political intrigue, the social dynamics, and the unknown dangers of the planet still awaited him. Yet he was ready. He had proven that human ingenuity, patience, and calmness could make a difference. And somewhere high above, Princess Kalira watched him from her chambers, thinking about the human who had not only survived her tests, but had also begun to change the way she thought about strength, courage, and intelligence. She could not yet admit it fully, but Liam's presence had begun to leave a mark on her, one that would influence her actions, her decisions, and perhaps even her understanding of humanity itself. The night stretched on, and the city below shimmered like a constellation come alive. Liam's quiet determination, his thoughtful actions, and his refusal to rise to provocation had begun to ripple outward. The court of Virelia, and even the princess herself, were beginning to see humans in a new light, not as inferior beings, but as capable, resourceful, and resilient allies. In that moment, Liam understood something important. Influence did not always require words or force. Sometimes quiet observation, calm action, and steadfast integrity could achieve what arrogance and pride never could. And for the first time on Virelia, the royal court was beginning to recognize it. The stage was set for even greater challenges, and Liam knew that his journey had only just begun. The city of Virelia had begun to feel strangely alive to Liam. The floating towers, the softly glowing streets, the hum of energy underfoot. It was no longer just a backdrop to his mission. It was a network of life and power, and he moved through it with careful observation, learning the rhythms, the patterns, and the people who made the city function. He had gained trust among some of the palace staff, and even a few of the younger Virelians looked to him for guidance in situations he had not directly influenced. Princess Kalira, meanwhile, was becoming more unsettled. She had spent months training her mind to be the sharpest, her skills the most precise. Yet she could not shake the feeling that Liam's quiet presence challenged her authority in subtle ways. Every time he acted with composure, every time he made a calm, intelligent decision, she felt the fragile tremor of admiration mix with irritation. She had never met a human who could evoke both emotions so powerfully. A new threat had emerged on Virelia, one more sophisticated than the rogue faction Liam had uncovered earlier. Reports indicated that a clandestine group was planning an attack on the palace itself, using both technology and strategy unfamiliar to Virelians. The council debated options, but their arguments grew circular, focused more on tradition than results. Liam, having studied the patterns of previous conflicts, realized the group's approach was methodical. They exploited the very pride and confidence that Kalira and her court depended upon. Kalira approached him privately, her tone sharper than usual. "I do not understand how you can see what others cannot, human. You are not trained in Virelian strategy, yet you anticipate their moves before they even make them. Explain yourself." Liam met her gaze calmly. "I do not rely on tradition or pride, princess. I observe patterns, anticipate outcomes, and adjust accordingly. My focus is on results, not on appearances or authority." Kalira frowned but did not interrupt further. She had learned slowly that arguing with him was futile. His calm demeanor was not weakness. It was an unspoken strength, one she could not match with her usual confidence alone. The first signs of the new threat appeared as subtle disturbances across the city. Transport drones were slightly delayed, energy grids fluctuated, and certain access points were breached without immediate detection. While the council debated explanations, Liam worked quietly, piecing together the pattern. He noticed a trail that suggested the attackers were using advanced cloaking technology, almost invisible to the naked eye and untraceable by standard surveillance. He decided to investigate personally. Moving through the city's lower levels, Liam navigated the labyrinthine corridors beneath the floating towers. The air was cooler here, filled with the hum of machinery and the occasional spark of raw energy. He observed anomalies others would overlook: a flicker in a holographic display, a displaced energy conduit, a shadow that did not belong. Each detail formed a thread in the fabric of the plan being executed against the palace. Kalira, observing from above, could not help but feel a mixture of frustration and admiration. She had tried to dominate the situation, to assert her authority, but Liam moved with a quiet precision she could neither control nor fully understand. Every discovery he made, every calculation he executed, subtly undermined her assumptions about human inferiority. When Liam returned to the palace with his findings, he explained them succinctly, highlighting the points the council had missed. He proposed a strategic response, one that involved coordinated monitoring, subtle defensive repositioning, and predictive countermeasures. Kalira listened intently, her pride reluctant to admit it, yet she knew that his approach was effective. Over the next several days, they worked closely together to implement the plan. Liam coordinated teams, assigned tasks, and anticipated potential missteps before they could occur. Kalira observed him, noting how he inspired confidence without asserting dominance, how his calm clarity allowed the staff to perform better than they ever had. The palace began to function more efficiently under his influence, even as Kalira's curiosity about him deepened. One afternoon, during a review of security data, Kalira found herself speaking to Liam in a quieter tone than usual. "You do not seek recognition, human. You act, and yet the results speak louder than any words could. Why is this so?" Liam looked at her thoughtfully. "Because action is stronger than words. Pride and authority are tools, but results are what matter. I act to protect, to understand, and to resolve problems, not to impress anyone." Kalira considered his words. She had lived her life commanding attention, ensuring obedience and asserting dominance. Liam's quiet strength made her rethink everything she had been taught about influence and power. She felt the stirrings of respect growing into something more, a fascination she did not fully understand and could not easily admit. Tensions escalated as the clandestine attackers made their first move. A network of sabotage was discovered within the palace's lower systems, threatening both energy supply and structural integrity. Liam quickly assessed the situation, directing countermeasures with precise instructions. He did not panic, he did not shout, he simply acted, and the palace defenses responded with remarkable efficiency. Kalira, standing beside him, could only watch in awe. Her usual instinct was to take control, to issue orders, yet she realized that in this situation, Liam's human intuition was superior to her traditional methods. She deferred to him, albeit silently, allowing him to guide the response. The attack was neutralized before it could escalate, thanks to Liam's anticipation and planning. The palace was safe, the attackers foiled, and the court was left astonished. Advisors whispered among themselves, acknowledging that the human had proven invaluable, even to the royal family. Later that evening, Kalira found herself in the palace gardens once again, watching Liam as he reviewed reports and spoke with staff. She approached him cautiously. "I must admit you have changed my perspective on humans. You are not only capable, but remarkable. I did not expect this." Liam looked up, meeting her gaze calmly. "I do not seek to change perspectives, Princess. I seek only to act responsibly and effectively. Recognition is not my goal." Kalira studied him in silence, realizing that his words carried the weight of truth. She had expected humans to be reactive, emotional, or limited in their abilities. Yet Liam had consistently demonstrated patience, intelligence, and strength that did not rely on aggression or pride. His influence was quiet but undeniable, and she could not ignore it. Over the following days, their working relationship deepened. Kalira began to rely on Liam's judgment, his calm analysis, and his ability to foresee complications before they arose. The court gradually adjusted as well, recognizing the value of his input and the unique perspective he brought as a human. While some Virelians still struggled with the idea of equality between species, they could not deny the effectiveness of his actions. One evening, as the twin moons reflected across the floating city, Kalira approached him privately. "You have accomplished much, human, and yet, you do not flaunt your success, you do not demand recognition. How do you maintain such composure?" Liam smiled faintly, though his expression remained calm. "Composure comes from understanding, princess. I do not ignore danger, nor do I dismiss challenges, but I focus on solutions rather than appearances. Strength is in action, not in pride or words." Kalira considered his answer, feeling a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something she could not quite define. She had encountered many leaders, many warriors, and many skilled individuals, but few had ever impressed her in this quiet, steady way. Liam's presence was reshaping her ideas about leadership, courage, and human potential. The following week saw further incidents where Liam's insight prevented potential disasters, each time subtly reinforcing the respect and trust he had earned. Kalira, while still proud and confident, began to see him as more than a guest or a human outsider. He had become an essential ally, someone whose intelligence, patience, and calm influence had earned him a place not just in the palace, but in the minds of those who once doubted him. By now, Liam's reputation had reached a point where even minor courtiers would defer to his suggestions. Kalira's pride had shifted into fascination, her challenges replaced by collaboration, and her irritation replaced by grudging respect. She could not yet fully articulate the change within herself, but she knew that her perception of humanity, and of Liam, was transforming in ways she had never anticipated. As another night settled over the floating city, Liam stood on the observation platform, looking out at the towers, bridges, and glowing streets below. The threat had been managed, but the lessons he had learned and those he had imparted to Virelia were far from over. He understood that strength could be quiet, influence could be subtle, and courage could exist without shouting or force. Above him, Princess Kalira observed from her chambers. Her thoughts were complex, a blend of curiosity, admiration, and the recognition of a new kind of strength. She realized that Liam had quietly reshaped the palace, the court, and even her own assumptions about humans. What had begun as a challenge, an insult, had evolved into a profound lesson in resilience, intelligence, and quiet power. And so, as the city shimmered under the twin moons, a subtle but undeniable shift occurred. Liam's presence had begun to influence not. The days on Virelia had become a rhythm that Liam understood better than many of the residents. The floating towers, the glowing streets, the subtle shifts in energy, all formed a network he could navigate with patience and observation. The palace had returned to a cautious calm after the thwarted sabotage, but tension still lingered in the air. The court was watching, the princess was watching, and the whispers of his deeds had spread far beyond the palace walls. Kalira had changed. Her pride was intact, but it now carried a subtle humility she had never experienced before. She found herself observing Liam not as a guest or an anomaly, but as a presence that challenged her assumptions and reshaped her understanding of strength, courage, and leadership. He moved among the palace staff and advisors with quiet authority, his calm, deliberate actions influencing events in ways that the Virelians had never seen. One morning, a new alert arrived from the city's outer sectors. A group of rogue ships had been detected, moving in a formation that suggested both intent and precision. The council debated strategies as they always did, but their discussions quickly became circular. Liam stepped forward, studying the reports with careful attention. He noted inconsistencies, patterns, and potential weaknesses that the Virelians had overlooked. Kalira watched him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. She had learned to rely on instinct and authority, but Liam's methodical approach demonstrated results she could not ignore. "Human," she said quietly, "you see things others miss. You act with calm, even when we panic. How do you remain so steady?" Liam met her gaze, calm and resolute. Because I focus on understanding and action, Princess. Panic and pride do not solve problems. Observation, patience, and careful action do. The rogue ships approached the city at a speed that would have intimidated most pilots. Liam quickly devised a strategy, combining the Virelian defense systems with his human understanding of tactics and timing. He instructed the palace defenders on positioning, coordination, and anticipation. The ships were strong and advanced, but Liam's analysis gave the defenders an edge they had never experienced before. The confrontation began in the skies above Virelia. Ships moved in precise formations, energy beams cutting through the night. Virelian pilots executed maneuvers, but Liam's instructions guided them with clarity and efficiency. His human perspective, based on logic and observation rather than pride or tradition, allowed them to anticipate enemy moves and respond effectively. Kalira observed from the command center, impressed by the seamless coordination Liam had inspired. She had trained for combat and leadership her entire life, yet she could see clearly that his calm, strategic approach was superior in this moment. The human's influence was undeniable. The battle ended with the rogue ships retreating, outmaneuvered and outsmarted. The palace and the city were safe. The court erupted in whispers of amazement, and Kalira allowed herself a rare moment of admiration. Liam had not sought recognition or reward, yet his actions had changed the outcome entirely. Later that evening, Kalira invited him to the palace gardens. The floating lanterns cast shimmering reflections across the water-like platforms. She approached him with a measured, thoughtful expression. "You have done more than I could have imagined, human. Your calm, your patience, and your intelligence have saved this city more than once. I underestimated you, and I admit it freely now." Liam inclined his head slightly. "I do not act for praise, Princess. I act to protect, to understand, and to achieve results. Recognition is not my goal." Kalira considered this, her mind shifting. She had always believed in strength as dominance and courage as defiance. Liam had shown her a different kind of strength, a quiet, deliberate, intelligent courage that inspired others without demanding attention. She realized that his presence had transformed not only the palace but also her own perspective. Over the following days, Liam continued to work with the palace and city officials, ensuring that defenses were improved, systems optimized, and potential threats neutralized before they could escalate. His human ingenuity and calm determination continued to influence Virelia in ways no one had anticipated. The court now regarded him with respect, and even those who had doubted him had begun to seek his counsel. Kalira, however, was still learning. She observed him closely, noting the subtle impact he had on those around him. His patience inspired calm, his intelligence inspired trust, and his quiet confidence inspired respect. She found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering what made a human capable of such influence without pride or force. One night, under the twin moons, she approached him privately. "Liam," she said softly, "you have changed much on this planet. You have shown strength without dominance, courage without arrogance, and influence without command. I did not expect this." Liam looked at her steadily. "I act as I must, Princess. Strength comes in many forms. Not all are measured by force or authority. Sometimes patience, intelligence, and calm resolve are stronger than any weapon." Kalira considered his words, feeling a shift within herself. She had always believed that power and authority were absolute, yet she had learned that there was another kind of power, one that was quiet, deliberate, and profoundly effective. She could not deny that Liam had earned a place in her mind and in her respect, perhaps even in her heart. In the following days, preparations began for a city-wide celebration honoring the defense of Virelia. Kalira insisted that Liam be present, not as a guest but as an equal participant in the planning and execution. The palace staff worked together under his guidance, and the city responded with enthusiasm and admiration. Humans and Virelians alike saw the results of his calm, steady influence. During the celebration, Kalira approached him amidst the crowd. The twin moons reflected in her eyes, and she spoke with sincerity that few had ever heard from a Virelian princess. "Liam, you have done more than protect this city. You have shown us a new way to act, to think, and to lead. I respect you deeply, and I am grateful for all you have done." Liam inclined his head, modest but steady. "Thank you, Princess. I have only acted as needed. The results belong to everyone who contributed, not to me alone." The princess smiled, a rare and genuine expression. She realized that respect and admiration could coexist with authority and pride, and that humans, even one human, could teach lessons that no amount of training could provide. As the celebration continued, Liam moved among the people, quietly observing, assisting, and supporting. He did not seek attention, yet his presence was felt everywhere. The city had grown stronger, safer, and more united under his guidance. The palace had learned that strength was not always shown in force or dominance, but in calm, intelligence, and deliberate action. Kalira, standing beside him later in the gardens, spoke softly. "I underestimated humans, Liam. I thought you would be easy to insult, easy to control, easy to dismiss. But you have shown me otherwise. You have shown me what humanity can be." Liam looked at her with quiet dignity. "I have only acted as I must, Princess. Humanity is capable of many things, but we succeed through observation, thought, and calm resolve. That is all I have demonstrated." Kalira nodded, her thoughts deep and reflective. She realized that her challenge, her insult, and her attempts to provoke him had been met with patience, intelligence, and quiet strength. Liam had not only preserved his dignity, but had also transformed her understanding of power, courage, and human potential. In that moment, the princess understood that the human she had once sought to test had, in fact, become a teacher. She had learned humility, patience, and respect from someone she had initially underestimated, and though she would never admit it aloud to the entire court, her fascination with him had grown into something deeper, a respect that could not be shaken by pride or tradition. The twin moons shone over the city, reflecting on the floating platforms and glowing towers. Liam and Kalira stood together in the palace gardens, observing the results of their combined efforts and the influence of quiet, steadfast human determination. The city was safe, the court was inspired, and the princess had begun to understand that strength could take many forms. The story of the 19-year-old alien royal who had once insulted a human, and the human who had walked away without a word, was no longer just a tale of confrontation. It had become a story of respect, learning, and the quiet power of intelligence, patience, and dignity. Liam's presence had reshaped Virelia, influenced a princess, and shown that humanity, in its quiet strength, could stand alongside even the most powerful alien societies. And in that moment, the princess realized something she could not deny. The human who had once turned and walked away had, in fact, left a mark deeper than any insult, challenge, or test ever could. He had earned not only her respect, but the recognition of an entire world. Virelia had changed forever, and so had she.